Maybe this wasn't a good idea.
You said someone was on the hot seat?
Maybe.
Let's see.
Okay.
Let's see what's going to happen here, Reverend Stringer. Oh, we are in church. Okay. So, Mark, this just happened to be one of the questions.
Yes.
And I am personally interested in it. How will shifting our focus towards community service and social justice strengthen our church in the long term?
Well, my kind of vision for our expansion in that side of our ministry is based on what I know about surveys of millennials and the generation that's coming after the millennials. And everything that I've read suggests that the future generations will only want to be invested in religious community if it's actually acting in the world and that actually does the work rather than just talk about it. And I know from all the conversations I've had with members of this church for the 14 years I've been minister here, that the idea of this church being a force in the community is something that we mostly all want. So I think by expanding our outreach and our ability to be effective in the community, we are not only preparing ourselves for the generations to come, but we're really owning who we say we have wanted this church to always be. And if we own it and we feel passionate about what's happening here, others won't be able to resist from being a part of what we're doing. And as far as I'm concerned, a church that's not growing and active in the world is a church that's not really a church.
All right.
You want more specifics?
No, we will accept that answer.
Yeah, survey says.
Yes. In the orange flower, you're correct. So, Mark, if you could improve, this is kind of a follow-up. So if there was one area of injustice in the greater Des Moines area that you would want to see our church work on, what would it be? How do you see us being able to address the issue?
Wow, there's so many ways that we could bring our Unitarian Universalist values to bear in the greater community. It's hard to pick just one. But I think, what's at the core of Unitarian Universalism is our willingness to engage with difference, at least on paper. That's really, in part, our primary way of being religious, is to give space to viewpoints and understandings that are different, and yet sharing an ethical core that demands equality and justice. And so I think any way that we can be active in expanding the reach of understanding through difference, that could happen through restorative justice efforts, which I know are going to be a focus for us in the year to come. But that can also happen as we march on the Pride Parade. That can happen as we choose other organizations to support with our time, but equally importantly, with our hands, with our presence. Anytime we can show up for our UU values, we're going to be making a difference in the community. So to pick just one thing, I'm hesitant. Clearly, economic injustice is a challenge throughout our nation. How to act on that as a church is something I'm not sure about. But I know that we can improve our abilities to expand our reach beyond the class container that Unitarian Universalism typically holds itself in, this kind of middle to upper middle class container. I think our liberal religious message will speak to people, when we live it with integrity, will speak to people of all classes. So I'd like to see us active on that front.
Thank you. All right. Take a breath. Are you ready for this?
I think.
Okay. I'm going to, a little hard, a little easy. We'll go back and forth. Okay. So why, when we have so many members, are pledges so much smaller and budget is being cut? There were a couple of cards around this, so I wanted to address it. Another person said, pledges are not meeting the budget. What's the plan?
Well, we didn't anticipate that the pledges would necessarily meet our budget. You got to realize we took a big leap when we hired the person to my left. A big leap, not so much in spirit, because clearly we hired the right person, and clearly she's doing the things with us that are helping us be the church that we want to be. But we did take a leap financially, and we knew that going into it. So we had this $100,000 in bequest money that we were going to use to grant ourselves the additional finances we would need over the next 2 to 3 years to help us meet our goals. We didn't make advances on the financial end as much this year as I would have hoped, but this next year really makes the difference as to whether or not we have to continue to change the way we do things as a church. Overall, our pledges did increase in total from last year by a very small margin, in part because last year we had a $25,000 challenge grant that was given by a generous member who believed in the vision of hiring an associate minister. That generous member was not able or probably even expected to repeat that gift this year, but we did make up that $25,000 through member pledges. In general, I think we could all be more generous to the church financially, at least most of us could. And so finding a way to speak about the value of a vibrant Unitarian Universalist congregation in Des Moines, Iowa is our challenge as a congregation, no matter who we are, no matter how long we've been here. The church can only be as vibrant and as active as its membership, and part of that vibrancy is how we choose to steward financially the work of this church. So I'd like to think that we'll have opportunities in the year ahead to reflect a bit more on the intersection of our resources and our generosity that will enable us to keep growing in the ways we want to grow, which is growing in spirit, growing in action in the community, and growing in our financial giving to the church. As a matter of fact, on September 26th, from 9:30 to 3 in Channing Hall, we will have a workshop with an outside consultant to talk to us more about how we could be more vibrant in our approach to stewardship. September 26th, mark it down. Love you too.
And the congregation responds?
Close to a raspberry, but not quite.
Ding, ding, ding. That was the purple one. All right. Mark, is it possible to build a deep sense of interdependence within a Unitarian congregation? What would it take to accomplish that in this congregation?
Willingness to be vulnerable, mostly. I mean, I think about my own participation in UU congregations over the years, and it all comes down to willingness to be vulnerable, to take risks, to get to know other people, to not take someone else's point of view or position as necessarily indicative of the one you have to hold, being willing to give people space. As we do that, as we engage with each other with open hearts and open minds, we start to build relationships, which is really the core of any kind of interdependence. It's hard to be interdependent or recognize your interdependence with others when you're not in relationship with them. So the opportunities that this church offers for you to get to know other people is what's really going to lead us to understand our interdependence. Whether that's Soul Matters, whether that's the ongoing small group ministry group that meets, whether that's one-on-one conversations that you arrange, whether that's your work in committees or in music programs, in classes. The more we know each other, the more we see ourselves in each other. We see our reflections in each other's eyes. And the more we grow our understanding of how we could serve each other. I'd love to see our caring ministry program more vibrant. You know what gets in the way of it being vibrant? Our willingness to ask for help. We have lots of people who would be willing to step up and do tasks and help other people. And we're so hesitant to ask each other for a hand. And it's only when we do that that we begin to see how much we can do for each other and how much that means to our understanding of our interdependence.
Thank you. Prepare yourself. Are you ever going to play a guitar and sing again in a service?
Yeah, someday. I don't really play guitar much. It's sad. I've got this beautiful guitar that Don Mostrom made, and I don't know, something about my kids running around, and Claire's kind of asking for it, though. She wants me to play, so I think she'll draw me out, and I'll definitely play sometime. Thank you for asking. It's very kind.
All right. Here are a series of questions on the same topic. Okay.
Guitar playing?
What key? What? No. Okay, Mark. What's going on with the Tomorrow team? Are there plans for another church in the Des Moines area? Will the congregation vote on moving or staying, and when? What are the strategies for staying vital and welcoming to new people as we stay in a space that is bulging at the seams?
Yeah. You know, the Tomorrow team, as many of you know, because over 150 of you came to the January sessions that they held, where if you were there, you know their primary task was to kind of help the congregation see the lay of the land. About a year and a half ago in the congregational survey, the question was posed, something to the effect of, is our space and facility adequate? And the majority said, yes, it is. Some of us who are on staff here or who are in leadership roles didn't see it the same way. So we put together a team that's been dubbed the Tomorrow team to look at what is the current lay of the land and what does that mean for our future. So they did extensive research. Perhaps many of you saw it. It's on the website if you didn't get a chance to see their presentation. It's really thorough. And what came from that research and that presentation is more clarity on behalf of the congregation that we actually do have a challenge, evidenced by one of the cards that describes us as bulging at the seams. So the Tomorrow team's next step, which they'll tell you more about at the annual meeting, I hope you'll stay, is to begin to think about what it would take to stay at this site and what that would mean for our future. So the clarity that we've received from the congregation is that by and large, people would like to stay here if that is smart, if that makes sense. So the Tomorrow team will spend next year looking into that question, researching the limitations of this property and this building. Where can additional space be created, if any? And what would be the financial impact of that? So the congregation can then hear the results and be a part of the conversation about what should we do. So we're really far out in this planning. There's no plan to move. There's no plan to stay. We're really just researching together. One of the things the congregation told the Tomorrow team very clearly is, we don't know enough. We don't know enough about what it would mean to stay. We don't know what you mean by satellite. We don't know what moving would look like. So help us figure that out, and that's what the Tomorrow team is charged to do. So I guess ultimately, I think if we made a mistake in the Tomorrow team approach, and I don't know if this would have been unavoidable anyway, is that I think it gave the impression that things were moving far more quickly than they really were. They're really not moving as quickly as it seems. We're just focused on the facts on the ground right now and what that impact would be in the future if we do nothing. So that's where we are. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, there's one more part of that. What do we do to welcome new people as we're bulging at the seams? Mm-hmm. That's a question for all of us, right? Like, I don't have an answer to that. The parking is challenging, but not overwhelmingly challenging, thanks in part to some of the improvements that we've made. More of you are parking over at Wells Fargo, which is a huge help. Deb Desert, our excellent Director of Finance Administration, arranged for some improvements to the parking down in the, was it East Lot? I always want to call it the South Lot. Anyway, so we're trying to do some things, but it's going to be a challenge for us. Finding ways that we can build community outside of Sunday service will matter a lot for us to feel connected to this church. I think some of our actions in the community will help us envision a congregation that's not just located here. But we'll see. I mean, things will unfold. We'll learn a lot, I think.
There was a PS, the new configuration in the lower lot is a good improvement. Thanks.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Okay, I think that these two kind of go together, and it segues from something you were just saying, which is really about the relationship of authority, kind of, actually, the structures of authority. So, and what does that look like between the laity and the staff and the ministers and the management team? So I'll read the questions, but that's the spirit in which I'm holding these questions. So someone wrote, in failure to succeed, you describe changes in membership behavior. How do you see this impacting our congregation? So there's a question around changes in membership behavior. And then there's a question around how are decisions here made, and which ones are made by you and Deb, and when is there room for member ideas and suggestions? Mm-hmm. So I think those are, in my mind, related. Good luck.
Well, as I think back to the first question you posed, I think that's referencing a sermon I gave a few weeks ago, and I think the membership changes I described in that book were more about the changing behaviors of membership. Like there was a time, even in the early part of my ministry, when a regular member would think of themselves as regular if they came about 3 times a month. And now signs are showing that people think of themselves as regular members and maybe only come once a month. So that changes the relationship of everything, of the space, of what we expect of members, what we can anticipate from members. So I think they're kind of separate.
Okay.
If you pose that question and I miss the mark, talk to me after the service, because I'd like to know what you meant. The other part of the question is is a bigger umbrella, how do decisions get made? The board operates under a program, an approach called policy governance, which basically is an approach that's been used by nonprofits and now congregations for a number of years to great success. What it really does is it empowers the executive, who is me, to basically help the church become the church it wants to be without undue interference from the board. And how that happens is the board tells the executive what the executive cannot do. The executive cannot present a budget that's not fiscally responsible. The executive cannot pay the staff less than a fair wage given market impact and all that stuff. The executive cannot fail to provide safe accommodations and employment and all that stuff, okay? So it's all the things I can't do. Then my challenge as your minister is to engage with you through the lay leaders, which would be the board, of course, but also the council and other membership opportunities for engagement, to help us understand how we can achieve our goals as a church. What that means, in short, is that I am empowered to work with you to come up with solutions that help us towards our goals. It effectively puts me ultimately in charge, yet still responsible to the board, but I would be an incompetent minister were I to assume that meant I was not I didn't engage with the congregation in some way. There's a variety of ways that engagement happens. It happens through the Council of Congregational Ministries, so that there are currently 7 of your fellow lay people on that council, and they interact with the various ministries in the church, hopefully engaging with you as participants and leaders, and they bring those concerns to our council meetings. And you'll see the impact of one of those conversations today at the annual meeting when we talk about some changes we're going to make to the offering. Those decisions then get made ultimately, in many cases, for operational matters by me. Deb works with me as part of the management team, and Deb is empowered to help me make financial decisions. She provides the research and the background. She works with HR concerns, and she helps manage our building and grounds. Those decisions don't require a congregational vote or conversation in most cases. But like when we think about this upcoming conversation about what are we going to do about our space, if the entire congregation isn't involved in some way in that conversation, any decision that's made will probably be wrong. So it's imperative that we all stay engaged. I know the board feels that way too, that they need to know where you're coming from. And that's why next year the board is going to be working with a consultant to invite you as congregation members to revisit those end statements. Those are like our vision statements. So there'll be an opportunity for you to weigh in on the things that you think are most important about our church as we look to the future. I hope that helps. It's probably clear as mud. But continue to ask your council and your board how it works, because between all of us, I think we'll help you make sense of it.
All right. We don't have time to answer this one, but I think you should consider it as a sermon topic.
Okay.
This is beautiful. How has your spiritual life changed in the past year? So I'll hand this to you. A great sermon.
Yes.
But since our time is coming to a close, I want you to breathe and get ready for this. Okay. Mark, do you know how awesome you are? Thank you.
But the funny thing is, the things I probably think are awesome about me, you wouldn't agree.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for your question.